So what is your name?
Joseph Arena.
And what is your rank?
I was a signalman second class,
What branch of the armed services did you serve in?
USNR. I was actually drafted into the Army, but when we went to be inducted, they said, who wants to go in the Navy? And all guys, we want to go in the Navy. But they gave us another test, and I thought, oh God, they're gonna give me another test. But all those guys had a book, you opened it up, and if you could read the numbers, which meant you weren't colorblind, and I could read the numbers, they hit my papers USNR.
How old were you?
18. I got out of high school in June. In September, I was in the Navy.
Starting what year did you begin your service and when did you?
43. Got out in 46.
What is your name?
My name is Mildred Murphy,
And what branch of the armed services did you serve in?
Army. I was an Army nurse during World War II.
How old were you when you joined?
18 maybe? We volunteered actually because they were short of nurses with so much going on, and so I decided I wanted to go and do whatever I could to help.
Yeah.
But I always thought that God gifted me to be able to do that, so I volunteered, and I went to this hospital. It was Halloran Army General that the Army had set up close to the piers over in Staten Island, so that when the ships came in with the badly wounded, we were able to go out on convoy in ambulances and get them back to the hospital as soon as possible. The night before we went up on the floors for the first time, we had to sit with a psychiatrist counselor, and he said, you're not going to see what you've been normally seeing in a civilian hospital, but when you get to the floors, you're going to see some terrible, terrible situations, and please don't show any emotion until you're finished, and then when you come off the floors 8 hours later, if you have to do whatever you have to do, it's okay, but not in front of these fellows. So when we went up on the floors, we saw fellows our own age, had lost arms, legs, back of their heads blown away, and some terrible sights, and moaning and screaming and terrible, terrible suffering that they were going through.
Starting what year did you begin your service and when did you end?
I think it was somewhere around 44, and I was there when the war ended in 45.
What is your name?
Robert H Mcrae,
What branch of the armed services did you serve in?
the infantry,
How old were you when you joined?
around 21. I was drafted for World War II, but we just started the dairy farm. Are you familiar with Triangle Road?
Yep.
Where the middle school is, my barns used to be there. And Triangle Road School is also on my dairy farm. And the house was across the street from the school, but they knocked that down when the power lines went over. My mother went with me because she's so afraid I was going to be drafted that she and my sisters would be stuck with taking care of the cows and the field work. And they said, no, we won't even take him now because he's still in high school. I was in junior year of high school. Well, by the time I was out of high school, where they might have taken me, the war was over. But then Korea came along, my paperwork was in.
What was your rank?
I attained the rank of Sergeant First Class. But I attained the rank in the States, which was unusual, of sergeant with one rocker, because I was in my early 20s and there were so many boys in 17, 18 years old. I guess they figured I could handle the authority better.
When did you begin your service and when did you end?
It started February 16th of 1951 and got out 1 week early, February 9th, 1953.
What is your name?
Paulo Biaggio.
What branch of the armed services did you serve?
Army.
How old are you when you joined?
I did not join, I was drafted. The draft was when you turned of 18 of age, you had to serve 2 years in the service in the military. There was two things that during the time of the Vietnam era, either you went to college or you had to be married, so you didn't get drafted. Or you skipped the country. A lot of people chose to skip the country. So at the age of 20, I was drafted, I was going to college, but I could not afford to go anymore. So the minute they know I dropped out, took me in.
Well, what year did you begin your service and when did you end?
1965,
And how long?
2 years. The draft is 2 years.
What is your name?
My name is Ted Dima.
And what is your rank?
My rank was Specialist E4. E4 is pay grade.
What branch of the armed services did you serve?
I was in the United States Army.
And why did you serve in this branch?
Probably because all my relatives were in the Army. I never gave it a second thought. My father, uncles, cousins, my time came, soon to be in the Army.
Starting what year did you begin your service and when did you end?
My service began in actually February 1967 and ended in January 1969.
What is your name?
Keith Marley,
What branch of the armed services did you serve in?
the Navy. I joined when I was 17, and as soon as I graduated school, I went in at 18.
What was your rank?
I got out of active duty at almost 4 years as an E5, which is a petty officer, second class. And then I went back in about 3 years, broke the service to go to school, and then I went in, retired at 23 years as a chief.
What year did you begin your service and then what year did you end?
I started in July of 1968. Got out, it was New Year's of 1971. Went back in the end of 73 and retired in 94.
What is your name?
My name is John Burke.
What branch of the armed services did you serve in?
I served in the Army.
How old were you when you joined?
It was a long time ago. I was probably just turned 18, but when I was 17, I was going to the recruiter's office. I was in high school, probably like you are right now.
Yeah. Or what was your rank?
I was a sergeant.
Why did you serve in this branch?
I think my father had something to do with it. He was a World War II veteran. There was a number of us that joined. I went with my best friend Bob and Greg, and we were going, one, kind of following in our father's footsteps, but two, we really believed at that point we were going to bring peace to the world. You know, like there was a really good mission in what we were doing.
Starting what year did you begin your service and when did you end?
I began in 1967, August of 67, and I ended in June of 69.
What is your name?
I am George Marias.
And what's your rank?
My rank was E4.
What year did you start your service and what year did you end?
I started 1966 to 1969.
So you weren't drafted?
Well, I got my draft notice, but I didn't want to be drafted, so I enlisted.
What is your name?
My name is Rich Feldman,
And what branch of the armed services did you serve in?
the Air Force.
How old were you when you joined?
When I was commissioned, I was 21.
What was your rank?
I left as a captain. I went in as a second lieutenant.
Oh, why did you serve in this branch?
I was in college and I wanted to do something patriotic, and it was during the Vietnam War, and I felt I was able to get into the ROTC program at my college, so I had the choice between Navy and Air Force, and I preferred the Air Force.
What year did you begin your service and what year did you end?
I started my ROTC in 1969. I was commissioned in 1972, and I left in 1977 in active duty, but it was just after the first Gulf War that I resigned my commission, so 1990.
What is your name?
My name's John Kaufman. I was in the U.S. Army.
And how old were you when you joined?
I joined when I was 19 and served for 4 years, in 1994 through 1998.
What is your name?
My name is Major John Lapido. I happen to be a full-timer in the National Guard, which is approximately 10% of the force, but they have to have some full-timers to actually work during the week because the Guard is a reserve force, so most of their people come in 1 weekend a month. I happen to be active duty, but I stay in New Jersey.
Why did you serve in this branch?
My father was a former military, retired, full bird colonel actually, so I guess he influenced me that way. I was always interested since I was a kid. I was playing Army on the tracks out in Hillsborough where I grew up, and always had an interest towards the military. Then when I grew up, I wanted to serve my country, so I joined right out of high school. I joined the Army in 1989 actually. September of this year I'll be 24 years in. I was enlisted too for a while, and now I'm an officer. I started as an enlisted guy.
What job did you perform?
I was a signalman. Actually, the ship that I was on, we were in charge of the fleet, the whole group of ships going over. And we were with the Commodore, who had his own signalman, radio man, sonar man, and his own group. So we were supplementing the normal crew on that ship. Everything was visual. No lights, no radio. And as we were going across the Pacific, it was up to the signalman to signal the other ships when to make a turn, what direction to go. And we did it all with flags or with semaphore.
Where were you stationed during the time that you were
Well, it was
serving?
called Halloran Army General. And what the Corps of Engineers did, they took over a hospital on Staten Island. And made, the base was unbelievable, it was so big. But it was there to house at least 5,000 to 10,000 wounded. And then we had access to the piers and the ships coming into the New York harbor so that we could go out. What they would do is we'd go through Bayonne and Jersey City, Union City, through the tunnels and right onto the piers, and the police would have all of that blocked. And it was so amazing because the people knew when they saw the ambulances, 50 of them going out, that we were going to the ships to bring these fellows back. And when we came back, they were, it was packed with people with flags and crying and so happy to see these fellows on home.
What job or role did you perform?
Actually, I was a mortar section leader. The weapons platoon had 3 57 recoilless rifles and 3 60mm mortars. I had the 3 60mm mortars.
And our assignment was to find and recover dead bodies. So I had to learn all the medical skills, dental chart, human body remains. We practiced that on dummies. But after that, we went out on the field. And that was it. I did not go to Vietnam right after school. I went to Korea. I went from Korea, I was on a 49th parallel. From there, I went to Vietnam for 6 months. While I was in Korea, served in the 49th parallel. I was trained because I was an MP working, I don't know what you know about the 49th parallel. It's the border of North Korea and South Korea, which is still a country that is divided. Okay. And I was assigned up in the 8th Army with the 2nd Infantry Division, and I used to walk the lines and watch, as an MP, make sure that nothing was going on with the Russians, with the Chinese. And from there, my commanding officer found out that I was high marksmanship in boot camp, and he took me out and he sent me to Seoul, Korea, and I was in the 8th Army pistol team, ready to qualify for the 1966 Olympics. But unfortunately, I never made it. They found out more about me, and they sent me to Vietnam instead. The two fellas that we were going to join the Marine Corps with, one of them died in combat.
How old were you when you went in?
I was 21, and just in July and August I came 21. From 18, because you have to register with the draft board at that time. You had to go in there and register with the draft board. As a matter of fact, to make it even better interesting, I had a girlfriend of mine, so she worked in the draft board, and every time my name came up, she used to keep burying my name. She said, Paulo, your name came up. He said, I put it underneath. Because they went by the number. See, and you had to take a physical also. When you turned of age of 19, you had to go for the physical. And whatever was your physical, if you were classified as 1A, you're way up there. And you would have been the first, which I wind up classifying from 1A.
Were you in any specific war, and if so, which one?
Yeah, right after I finished training, I was sent to Vietnam. And that was July of '67.
Where were you stationed at that time?
Now, I was stationed in what they call I Corps. At that time, Vietnam was divided into 4 areas. I Corps was the northernmost part of South Vietnam. If you've ever heard of Da Nang or Chu Lai, those are the biggest cities. It was all, and they were on the coast.
Yeah.
So we were stationed in and around those big cities, and we went on operations all the way west to the Laotian border. Well, I was a combat infantryman, foot soldier, grunt, that you may hear that term today with soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Were you in a specific war, and if so, which one?
Vietnam. After I got out of training, I flew into Saigon, and I was there for about 2 weeks before I was sent to Cam Ranh Bay. And then they flew me down to Saigon again for about a month. And I ended up in Saigon right at Tet of '68. But during Tet, everyone was being attacked. They didn't know where anything was coming from. And so at age 18, they threw me up on the roof with a machine gun, and nobody there to tell me what to do. I had no clue if I was supposed to shoot or sit there or what I was doing. It was kind of insane. But I sat through about 2 or 3 hours of that, and then they got me off of the roof.
That's good.
After I made 1 rank, they found out that I liked to play with cars back home. So they made me the vehicle maintenance petty officer, and which I had about 6 vehicles. I worked at a command unit, and it was a joint unit. The commander was the head of, he was the 3rd Coastal Zone Advisor, which advised the Navy, Vietnamese Navy, in all of 3 Corps. And also he was the Coastal Surveillance Center commander, which surveilled all the coastal region for 3rd Coastal Zone, which included all the Mekong Delta up to a certain area. And so I got in to that, and they just made me a watch stander, basically for security and also for radio operations and things like that. My rating was a quartermaster, which is like a navigator, map plotter, boat steerer, that kind of thing. And I never got on a boat until I made E5. I stayed there for 3 tours. So I got into a lot of operations that I found very interesting at the time, working with SEALs and stuff like that.
Where were you stationed?
In Vietnam, it was a little bit north of the city of Hue. It was, and we were really not in one place because I was in infantry, so we were in the field most of the time. So we were in the mountains a little bit west of Hue. We were a little bit towards some of the beaches as well, and we were in a lot of different places, I guess. I was trained for infantry, and when I first got there, my particular unit was out in the field, so they needed somebody to do mortars. So I started in mortars, 4-point deuce mortars, which I'm not sure they still even have that today. It's a very large type of mortar, and I did that for probably the first 2 or 3 months that I was there. And then after that, I went into the reconnaissance platoon, and I worked with them. And this is my uniform right here. It's pretty much all that's left of me. It's my unit. You can see it was the 101st Airborne. I think to earn this, you had to be in combat for 100 days or something like that to get it, but it's called a combat infantry badge. And I'm proud of that because I have one picture of my father that I recently just discovered that he's wearing a combat infantry badge, and I never knew that. I never knew he was in combat. He had fought with Patton in World War II, and he never spoke about it. And I just was talking to his sister, and I learned that he, had the same combat infantry badge that I did.
It's pretty cool to find out.
It was really cool.
What war were you in? If you were in?
Vietnam.
What was your job?
I was a pulse acquisition radar mechanic for a Hawk missile system. This radar actually picks out targets. There was two separate radars. One picked out the target, what direction it was in. The other one told you how high it was. We would then send that signal over to another radar, a high-powered radar, which then would triangulate with the missile, so the missile could blow up the aircraft. But the missile didn't fly directly to the plane. It computed where the plane was going to be.
Oh.
So otherwise it would never catch it.
Yeah.
The missiles only flew at Mach 1, and the planes flew, some of the planes flew faster than that. But there's a picture of it in the background here.
Oh, yeah.
That's the one that found the direction of it. And I didn't get a picture of the other one. We also repaired the battery control central, which was sort of a small, tiny room, portable room that 2 operators and an officer sat in. The operators sat at consoles here, and the officer sat at this console. And they watched all the input from the radars and from the missiles and all that. They could see the sky.
I was during the Vietnam era. I actually volunteered to go to Vietnam, and they sent me to Cape Cod, Massachusetts, an Air Force station on Cape Cod. And after that, I went to the Azores, which are a group of islands in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And my final assignment was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was a personnel officer at my first assignment in Massachusetts, and I was responsible for the alternate command post for the 21st Air Division, which is all the Northeast United States and the eastern part of Canada. And at one point I was managing all of the defenses for the entire Northeast. Also, during that time, as I said, it was during Vietnam, one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my entire life is I was what's called casualty services officer, and I had to notify families of the deaths and or serious injury of one of their loved ones. And of all the things I've done before and after that, that has always been the worst, most difficult thing. My active duty service ended in 1977. Basically, I was able to keep my commission for at least 20 years.
I happened to be in a very small unit. In fact, the amount of active people in the unit I was in was about 1,000. So when you look at big divisions and you compare that, it's no comparison. The unit I was in was the 4th Psychological Operations Group. There is only one active place where that job is where people work in that job, and that's at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. There was a battalion inside that group called the 9th Psychological Operations Battalion that I served in for the balance of my time. Yeah, so psychological operations is, or PSYOPs as it's referred to informally, is really about winning the hearts and minds of people in a region where we may be doing something. So when I served in some, in some real situations in Bosnia and Albania. So my job was maybe less typical, where a lot of people think of military and they think of weaponry and winning with blunt force and so forth. We were kind of tasked with a unique mission of understanding what a sentiment is in a country and figuring out a way to have the population do something that we wanted them to do without force. So we would use tools such as radio broadcasts, influencing local media to relay a message that we wanted that population to hear. If they hear it from their own people, they believe it better than if we just disseminate and broadcast things to them, but we did some of that too. In the Albania example, it was pretty more simple. In that example, when I served, I was tasked with helping the United States Marines evacuate the U.S. Embassy and any civilians that were there. So my job in that function was to go along with the Marines, going from a helicopter from a boat in the Adriatic Sea to the embassy. They were leading the effort of pulling people in, and we were broadcasting radio messages telling people to stay away and let us alone and everything will be fine.
When I started out in the military, I was National Guard part-time for about 11 years. Since 2000, I've been active duty, and I've been stationed West Trenton, Mercer County Airport, 1st and 150th Aviation, because my branch is aviation. Every officer has their own specific branch that they all hold some sort of branch, whether it be infantry, armor, artillery. Mine happens to be aviation, and aviation was in West Trenton when I started. Then I moved over to Fort Dix, and then from Fort Dix I worked at Seagirt Recruiting Retention Command, and now then I went to Rutgers ROTC as an instructor, and now I'm here at Somerset as the Regional Support Group Operations Officer. In the middle of that, in 2005, I was deployed to Iraq for a year. I started out as a training officer, as a captain, as aviation training officer, where I ran plans and operations for an aviation battalion, 1st and 150th Aviation. Then I became their operations officer when I got promoted. It's called an S3. I was the operations officer of aviation. Actually, dating before that, I was the company commander of headquarters and headquarters company. Then I became their training officer. Then I became their operations and plans officer, called the S3. Then I went to Recruiting Retention Command as a recruiting company commander, and then I went through Rutgers as an assistant professor of military science, where I taught the freshmen in Rutgers Army ROTC.
Well, when we would anchor just before an invasion, the ships used to be surrounded by one ship that would go around making smoke. And one night we were making smoke and a Japanese plane came, kamikaze. And my station was up on an upper bridge. And this plane came over and we could hear it, and I was laying down, and right behind us was a hospital ship, and a suicide plane hit the hospital ship, and we had a lot of people get killed on that ship. It was scary. I think that was the most frightening moment I had while I was in the Navy.
Yeah.
When we made our invasions, being a troop ship, when we went to Okinawa, we also picked up casualties. And on the way back from picking them up, we took them to Saipan. We buried about 6 people at sea. They didn't make it. And that's, I can't say exciting, but that was one of the things I remember happening then. My first 9 months I was on a minesweeper in the Atlantic. And after that, I was assigned to this troop ship on the West Coast that went out to the Pacific. And all the time I was out there, I had 1 day liberty in Pearl Harbor, 1 day liberty in the Philippines, 2 day liberties in Okinawa, and 1 day's liberty in Japan. That was the extent of my liberty. That was a day off the ship on land. No, we had 1 more day on one of the islands where they gave us warm beer and all the guys got sick. I could watch the flamethrowers and I could watch the Japanese open up their cave doors. And when they would open up the doors, our battleships would lob a shell right into that cave. I could watch all of that. It's like watching television today.
Except you were up there close and personal.
I was in a good spot to watch it.
We were all basically the same age.
Mm-hmm.
And for instance, you know, I had 40 young fellas with no arms and no legs, you know. And I remember one time, Bob Hope and Jerry Colonna, that the young crowd probably don't remember, but in any event, they were there to entertain all of this military. And he got ahead of me as we were going up to the ward, and I knew what he was going to do. Obviously, he's going to put his hand out to shake the hand of the first veteran. And he realized that he didn't have any arms. And he looked at me like, can I go to the next one? And I said, no, they're all the same. And he turned, and he was, his teeth, you know, you could see he was filled with emotion, and he just shook his head and walked away. And the ships were coming in, one right after the other, and we would go on what they called convoy. We would go all the way through the cities to get to the ships and get these fellows off the ships as soon as possible, and then put them in the ambulance. We had, back then, they had the old World War II ambulance. You might see them on MASH. There was a show, MASH, that was the end. We had 4 patients that we could put in an ambulance. But when the fellows came off the ships, and we put put them on the ground to get them ready to put in an ambulance, they was touching the ground and crying that they were home. I was there VE Day when the war ended in Europe, and we had the Daily News, many of the newspapers coming in to interview the fellows, and they said that they were happy, but they would be really thrilled when the war ended in the Pacific. It was amazing because when the war ended, we had a small white church on the grounds, and I looked out, and many of the fellows that were able to walk were kneeling all around this little white church because it was so small you couldn't get too many people in it, and they were on their knees with their heads down crying. And I will never forget that sight. It was unbelievable. They were so happy that everybody was coming home. You know, some of the fellows I had were prisoners in Japanese camps.
Mm-hmm.
And if a Japanese soldier spoke to one of our soldiers, he had to stand a certain way and bow a certain way. And if he didn't, the Japanese would take a machete and cut their legs off. So people don't know that. It's the same as the fellows that served at the Battle of the Bulge. They were in snow from their waist down for the 6 weeks that they fought that battle. And when we got them on the ships from circulation,
Yeah.
I think, besides other injuries, feet. You know, they lost their feet. I have a funny story. We had the WACs, that was the Women's Army Corps on the base. And whenever a ship came in with, 10,000 wounded, they always liked to have something going on to keep them as busy without them thinking about things. So our captain came up and she said, you know, the way the WACs have a baseball team, softball team, so we're going to form a softball. And so I said, okay, I'll go. So I play in center field, right? So we only had a few practices. So one day the ship came in and we had so many guys, and so our captain said, you know what, we're going down to the field, we're going to have a baseball game with the WAC. So we get down there, and to get ahead of my story, I had a patient, Sergeant Wallace, who was hit with a machine gun coming down at the Battle of the Bulge, and he laid in what they called a striker frame, and he was always moaning and crying, and for 6 months he just did nothing but moan and cry, and we tried everything to help him. So apparently they decided, unbeknownst to me, that they were going to bring him down on the field to see this game. So we get down there, and it's packed. I think it's like Yankee Stadium. Where's all these people? We're going to play this game. So it turns out that the WACs got up there, and I was playing center field. The ball was going here and there. I wasn't catching anything. And the first part of the first inning, I don't know, they were up maybe 15-0, and now it's our turn to bat. So I'm second to bat, and I thought, well, no, all I have to do is swing 3 times, and I can sit down. It's going to be all over. Somehow, the second ball, I hit it away that I spun around, and I ran to the base, and I hear everybody yelling. I'm thinking, whoa, what have I done? I went to third base. So now I got to run between the catcher and the pitcher to first base. And everybody's going, oh no. So after the game was over and the WACs beat us like 20-0, oh, it was terrible. My commanding officer, Captain Croce, who I worked in the operating room with, and very strict, I was petrified of him. He comes barreling across the field, we're all sitting, down, and he comes up, and my name was Kennedy before it was Murphy, and he said, Cadet Kennedy, stand up. So I said, yes, Captain. I stood up. He said, do you know what you did today? And I said, yes, sir, I do. He said, no, you don't. He said, you see, we have Sergeant Wallace here. 6 months of him moaning. He said he cried and laughed so hard at your mistake. He said, you did something that none of us doctors could do. He said the tears were rolling down his eyes because of what you did. So he said, thank you. So I said, oh, but I was happy about that. I made a fool of myself, but I made him laugh and a lot of others, and I said, that's okay, I'm fine with that. I have one other story. As I told you, I grew up in Hoboken, and my dad is a police officer, and Frank Sinatra's father was a fireman, and the firehouse was 2 doors down from where I lived. And so I used to see Frank Sinatra. He was younger than I, but I used to see him a lot. And whenever my father worked the 8 to 4 shift, we would have dinner at 5 o'clock, and my mother would always say to my father, well, how was your day today? And he'd say, well, it was a very good day, except they had to chase that fresh kid, that Frank Sinatra, off the beat. So I don't know what he did. Anyway, so 2 years before Frank Sinatra died, he's on Channel 13 talking about his life in Hoboken, and mentions Patrick Kennedy, the officer that was always chasing him. I just got a big kick out of that. And then another time when I was serving at the hospital, my Captain Garrigan came up to all of us and said, she was so excited, she said, we're going to have a wonderful star that's coming to us tomorrow, and his name is Frank Sinatra, and he's going to be entertaining, and she was like hyperventilating, and I was so excited, but I never told her I knew. I never did. So anyway, that day she says, all right. She said, Kennedy, you're going to be here. I'm here. And then she's got the rest of the officers lined up. The elevator door is going to open up. He's going to come in, and then he's going to walk right in the ward. And, oh, she says, oh, I'm so excited thinking about it. So I'm young. I'm thinking, I see him all the time right now. So he gets off the elevator, and he takes one look at me, and I don't want to say what he said. He said something like, "What the heck?" What he used the other word. Are you doing here? And with that, he grabs me and gives me a big hug, and my captain goes, she's like hyperventilating. You didn't tell me you knew him? And I go, no, Captain, I was in trouble over that. I had a young soldier that was dying, very badly wounded, and they put him in a private room, and they asked me to stay with him. His parents were on their way from Oregon, and I was kneeling next to the bed, and I had my arm, he was tucked into my arm, and he was in terrible shape. It was terrible. And I heard the elevator door open, and I said, oh, thank goodness his parents are here. And I looked down to tell him, and he had died. And I wondered when when the door opened up, and the parents stood there, I'll never forget how I still see that scene every day of what that must have looked like to parents to see their son laying in my arms.
It was the next day after we were hit pretty heavily by the North Koreans, and I think we were hit November 2nd, 1952. We lost 37 boys that day and 54 wounded. Although I hear the death count went up, some of the wounded probably didn't make it. But the next morning, I'm out in the forward trench. I'm normally on the back side of the hill, but I was in the trench, and I see this North Korean soldier digging a trench down the front side of the hill across the valley, 1,300 yards away. You needed binoculars to see him. And I was almost in a state of shock that he'd be doing it in broad daylight, and the colonel comes up and back at me, and, well, I didn't even hear him, but he startled me and said, what do you see, Sergeant? And I said, North Korean digging a trench down the front side of the hill across from us. And he said, you think you can hit him with the mortar? And I went down and I talked to my first squad, told them to take one increment off, and told them what stake that we had in the ground to focus in on. And I said, I'm going to go back up in the trench and I'll yell, fire. And you go ahead and fire at that time, just one round. So I went up, I looked, he was still digging, I said, fire. Well, of course, you hear a boom and through the air, and I couldn't believe it. It landed right on him. Normally, it would take 2 to 3 rounds of correction. You'd have to say left 20 or add 20 or take away 20 or whatever, but right on him. And he says, did you get him? I said, I don't see him anymore. And well, he didn't say much more, and but apparently he went down to the command post where my company commander is stationed in battle conditions, and he said, I understand that Sergeant McCrae likes Debbie Reynolds. She and Carlton Carpenter are going to be at the USO show 25 miles back. Make sure he gets there. Then the next day, I had my first shower in a month, change of clothes. I felt like a new man. was bussed back, saw Debbie Reynolds and Carlton Carpenter. Walter Pidgeon was there also, but he was a disappointment. He meant well, but the guys were literally going to sleep, because what he did, he read poetry to us. And Carlton Carpenter and Debbie Reynolds sang that Abba Dabba Honeymoon, and she was a little short thing, had red long johns on with bunny fur outlining the trap door, and Carlton Carpenter was so tall he would take her and shoot her right between his legs while dancing on the stage. I enjoyed the show and was very pleased that the Colonel, saw fit to have me go back and see them. I became friendly with a sergeant who was the forward assistant to the forward observer for the 105 Artillery, and the two of us would go to breakfast and lunch and supper where the others would stay in. They were so afraid to go out of the bunker, they would stay in the bunkers and eat sea rations. So we had gone down, ate lunch, and was coming back, and if I were standing in the archway there leading into the living room, a mortar round dropped in front of me and the sergeant about where these windows are, that close. Dug a hole 3 foot in diameter and a foot deep. Shrapnel tore through the pants leg of my right fatigue pants. I didn't get a scratch. And the sergeant was starting to get a little nervous, and he said, "Where should we go, Sergeant?" I said, "Let's climb down over the bank and go in my first squad bunker," which we did. I go in, I'm talking with Harris, my squad leader, and he's standing in the doorway, and I can read it right from these writings here. But he said, "Sergeant McCrae, you ought to come here. They're landing all around." "Sergeant McCrae, I'm hit!" 2 pieces of shrapnel in his right thigh, I believe, and 3 in the left. Of course he was bleeding and all, and I got some of the guys, we drug him further into the bunker where it would be safer. Took his jeans off, and I yelled to everybody, "Give me your Carlisle bandages." Well, you just had 1 Carlisle bandage on your belt to patch up a wound. They didn't want to part with them. I said, "Give them to me, I'll see to it that you get new ones." I gave mine and got 5 others, and I patched a wound, and I said, "Are you in awful pain, or can you hold out until the shelling stops? Because I don't want to call the medics out while these mortar rounds are coming in." He says, "That's okay, I can wait." And as soon as they stopped, I yelled medic, they came and took him. And that's the last I saw of him, and that probably was the end of the war for him. When I first arrived in Korea, I was placed in a military tent set up about 25 miles south of the 38th parallel. While there, I met a corporal, and we became friends. Before we were moved up to Heartbreak Ridge, well, I didn't know it as Heartbreak Ridge at the time. I only knew it as Hill 851, but I got called into the command post one day, and the company commander says, "You know what hill you're on?" I said, "Yes, sir, Hill 851. He says, "Better known as Heartbreak Ridge." Before we were moved up to Heartbreak Ridge, we started talking, he started talking strange. He said he was here on a religious mission and knew that he wouldn't return home. On the eve of November 3rd, 1952, the North Koreans hit us. They hit the 2nd platoon head on, which I was in back of, on the backside of the hill with the mortars. The corporal was in the 1st platoon, which was to the left of the 2nd platoon. The corporal grabbed a BAR and volunteered to go help the 2nd platoon. As he was following the trench to the 2nd platoon, he took a direct artillery hit. I happened to be in the command post when the corporal's body was brought in. The company commander asked me to go out and identify the body. Both arms were blown off at the shoulders. One leg was blown off at the hip, and the other at the knee. His face was charred black, but his dog tags were still around his neck. I took one of the 2 dog tags into the company commander and told him I couldn't identify the body. Well, here was the worst battle I was in. November 3rd, 1952. It was 8:30 p.m. and dark, but that didn't stop us from smelling some drink that the troops of the North Korean People's Army were passing around in the valley below us. Mind you, keep this in mind, everybody knew they were down there. We heard the sound of a bugle. They would blow a bugle before attacking. I was surprised that the 105 artillery, or at least the 81 millimeter mortars, were not called upon. As the North Korean People's Army came up Heartbreak Ridge, Hill 851, they hit the area that was held by the 2nd Platoon, 160th Infantry Regiment, 40 Infantry Division. We had 19 killed. That went up to 38 out here, and 54 wounded, so some of the wounded must have passed away. I had been up all day and all night. When the sun came up on November 4th, 1952, I walked down the trench toward the 1st Platoon. A soldier came toward me. I asked him if the bunker to my left had been checked out, and he said yes. I was so tired I sat down in the door of the bunker. Along came Master Sergeant Bob Craig. We got mixed up a lot because I was Bob McCrae and he was Bob Craig. And also he was the company first sergeant while out on line, and I was the mortar section leader, who asked me if the bunker had been checked, and I told him that I had been told that it had been. Bob said he would go in and look around. He pulled out his .45 and went in. He came out with a North Korean soldier at gunpoint. That guy could have blown my head off. I was sitting with my back to him. The North Korean soldier had an automatic weapon, and one foot was badly injured. I don't know how he was walking on it. The North Korean soldier told my company commander he was taken down, and every rifle platoon over there, our rifle platoons, had 2 to 3 South Korean soldiers. So they got one of the soldiers that was with one of our rifle platoons to come in, and the company commander would ask the question, and then this North Korean that was with us could interpret. The North Korean soldier told my company commander that the North Koreans thought we were the battle-weary 25th Division. That's the outfit we replaced, the 40th. We're not going to replace the 25th Division.
When I served in Vietnam, when I went from Korea to Vietnam, I went to Da Nang. And that was right by the Cambodia border. I was still assigned to Korea, the 8th Army, which is support command of the 2nd Infantry Division that is still in Korea. The 2nd Infantry Division could never leave that country, right, because they protect the southern part. The 8th Army was attached to them as support command. Okay? And what the support command was to supply ammunition, fuel, and my duty at that time, besides being up on the line with them, I was assigned to ammo. And we used to spend bunkers, armors, because Korea is very ill, and they kept all the ammunition and the projecting and all that. It was all in these bunkers. So I did that for a year, and then of course I went to Vietnam. So my first day on the rifle range, and back then there was no the weapons that they have now, where they were open sights. You only look through the little hole, and it was the M14, and and you get a clip, and then, so I get on the firing range and they give me the clip. I shoot the first 3 rounds to see if everything was okay. Then the next 3 rounds, I hit the target. And one of the NCO, one of the sergeant came over, they smacked me in the head. You missed it. I said, I don't think so. So, you know, they were tough. You didn't play no game. They called you names, they called you whatever. You had nobody to go to and say, oh. Now it's totally different. Then there was a pit. The fellow pulls up the target and he puts the little block marks and he picks up the binoculars and he goes, he says, you did it. He says, you qualified. Get off the range. He says, then the officer came over to me and he says, what's going on, son? He says, you scored a Valentine. I don't know if you know Valentine beer, you get the 3 rings, they're like that. So all my 3 rings were close like that, my 3 bullets. And he says, okay, you don't have to come back to the thing for the next week. I just stayed in the barrack and just rested and ate like a king. And meanwhile, all the other guys were marching every morning. And I didn't have to. But then all my buddies that were in boot camp, they said, you stupid idiot, you're going to wind up in there, you're going to do this, you're going to, you know, because there was that time when, you know, but I got lucky. But when I landed in Da Nang, they blew up the mortuary when I was there. The middle of the night, Charlie came in and destroyed the mortuary and ran out. Went to another location, had a lot of stories.
Like every soldier that goes to war, you don't know what to expect. Yeah. And everybody had their moments. We certainly had a few. And I guess the thing is, you know, the guys that I served with, they're like family. Yeah. Because you serve next to them out in the field. You know, we lived in the jungle for the most part. Every now and then we would come back to a base camp. So you were most closely with maybe 5 or 6 guys, and that was your family. You know, we didn't know what was going on all around us as far as, you know, the politics of what was going on. We were there for each other. I mean, that covers everything, but you know, it's not a specific action, but it's a total experience, especially when you're in combat. You get very close to the people you're with because you depend on each other for your safety.
Did you receive any special recognition or like an award or any medals?
Yeah, well, the one that I'm most proud of is a Purple Heart for being wounded in combat. I got a Bronze Star for meritorious service, Army Good Conduct Medal, and then 3 ribbons, 3 medals for service in Vietnam. The Vietnam Service Ribbon, the Vietnam Campaign Ribbon, and the National Defense Ribbon. And the other thing I did receive, which not everybody gets it, it's called a Combat Infantryman's Badge. And only soldiers that are designated as infantrymen can earn that. You can't go to training and get it. Yeah. You have to serve as a foot soldier in the field in the time of war to get it.
And I know you mentioned that you got like a Purple Heart for being injured. What was your injury?
Well, I was actually hit by a mortar round that exploded. And I got injuries to both legs, my chest, arm. The concussion probably took away most of my hearing in the right ear. Okay, these pictures are from the Special Forces camp that we were brought in to defend. And the name of the city or the town was Cam Duc, K-H-A-M-D-U-C. I think the Vietnamese pronounce it Cam Duc, but we Americanized it. After I was wounded, I was actually treated in this ditch until they brought me out to the runway, which is where this plane is. And then a helicopter took me out, and then I went to the hospital with some Korean patients. These were Korean Marines. We were at the 6th Convalescent Center in Cam Ranh Bay. That was the main, one of the main areas. These fellows here were fellow patients, but they were ROK Marines, Republic of Korea. And that's an overhead view of the runway that we were trying to defend. That's about it.
We used to shuttle Vietnamese regulars, South Vietnamese regulars by boat up the rivers, and they'd go into areas that were known to have combative, the enemy, BC. And so we'd take them up, probably 10 to 15 guys on a boat, and drop them off in one location, and they would go out and sweep down while we patrolled the waterway so that nobody could get across the water to get away from them. And we did that a number of times. We dropped seals off. My one strange memory was I went on a seal operation down in Sac Train, which is the southern part of the Mekong. And we got done with the operation. Everything went very well. And they decided to go out to have a drink. So we were going to go to a Vietnamese town and find a bar. And so we went in by boat. Like we stormed the thing, but it was just, we were just driving in and got to the place, went in, had a couple of drinks. We had a young Vietnamese guy that was the interpreter who never had a drink before, and so they all bought him a couple, and he staggered back after that. I found that very funny at the time. The SEAL operations were really interesting. I would go down there and we'd be out in the middle of nowhere, and they'd dress up, with their war paint on their faces, and I remember one time, it was an evening, they were going out after midnight, and they sat around a table and they had one light hanging off the ceiling, so it was kind of weird looking at night. So they're all sitting around, they got the paint on and everything, and they're talking their plans. I'm taking pictures, and this helicopter comes in the next day, and I was taking pictures of the whole thing. This helicopter comes in with a minigun on it, and it was a really small helicopter. It was not a very big one, and I found that really unusual. Never heard of that before. So I was taking pictures and everything. The next night they went out after their plan was all formalized, and they had the helicopter back up. And so I'm taking pictures of all this. So make a long story short, a day or two later after everything was done, get my camera, jump in the boat, and I head back home. And about a day or two later, I went to take the film to get it developed. There was no film. They took the film out. I never knew that. I thought the whole time I was getting these fantastic pictures and everything, and they ended up taking the film. So I thought that was a little unfair to me.
I like the kids there. Like that was one of the things that I liked most about Vietnam. There was a little boy named An, and he was 11 years old, and he used to get us things. Like when we would come back, like we had one area that we kind of came back to, but if we needed Coke or cigarettes or whatever, like and even there was one time, it was Christmas, and we came back in the field, and there was a ceasefire at Christmas and Easter. For the holidays. What's interesting in the war, like the North Vietnamese and the U.S. both agreed to a ceasefire at that time. And I remember we came back, and we were actually on a water tower. It was a 50-foot concrete water tower. And I remember talking to An, and I haven't thought of this story in many, many years, that I started to describe a Christmas tree, and I said I wanted if he could get us a Christmas tree, because we're in the middle of Vietnam and there's nothing there that looks like a Christmas tree that I had seen. So I described it to him, and he came back about, I think the next day, and he had something that looked like a pine tree. and it was really cute because we put it on top of the water tower that we were on, and it was a really good time. And then there was another memory around that Christmas too. I remember that we were, and actually this wasn't Vietnam. This was another story. This was in advanced infantry training down in Louisiana, which was the most miserable place in the world. Vietnam was actually nicer in terms of the landscape and the weather. At that time, we were in the middle of nowhere and it was cold. And we were out doing some type of bivouac, and the truck broke down that was going to pick us up. And it's 12 o'clock at night now, and it's dark, and we're 30 miles from the base, and we're under some type of tent, and it's raining unbelievably hard, and we don't know when we're going to get back. And there's about, I'd say, 100 people there. And our first sergeant said, "Why don't we sing Silent Night?" And that 100 people in the middle of nowhere in the forest started singing Silent Night, and I just remember that. Like, it was like a really, really special moment.
My life in Vietnam was kind of boring because with the type of job that we did, the enemy didn't seem to waste their ammunition on us. So nothing much really happened, other than during Tet, which the whole country had issues. There was an ammo dump not that far away from us. Anyway, this is a little map. Benoit Air Base was the air base that we protected. Long Bin was where a lot of the U.S. forces had their headquarters and units. This was a village that was well known. We were located right about here, and during Tet, the enemy was fighting behind us, heading to the airport, and also trying to get into Long Bin because the main ammo dump was situated there. I was there the whole year I was there. I watched that blow up 2 times. And that was only about a half a mile from us. So during Tet, when it blew up, you could feel the concussion.
Yeah.
And you could just a huge mushroom cloud appear, and it was like snowing black. It was very comfortable being there for me. It seemed kind of odd. The first 2 days was kind of weird because you get there and they don't give you a weapon. You had a replacement depot, and you're waiting for your unit to come pick you up. But they don't give you any firearms. And all night long there's shooting going on. You know, there's all kinds of weird things going on.
You're pretty close to the front at that point?
Well, the front's everywhere.
Well,
I mean,
yeah, that's
you know, it's
true.
It's,
Good point.
You didn't know when or what's going to happen.
Yeah.
It just, you know, but you could hear it. It wasn't that far away all night long for 2 days. And then you get to your unit, and then you get issued all your equipment. But for months, because I got there in April of '67, and Tet didn't happen until January of '68. So that was the biggest battle that we were not exactly involved in, other than because you were in the middle of it. Everybody around us was getting attacked. They just kept ignoring us. Nobody wanted to waste their bullets on us. But so many rounds were going back and forth that we were ducking everybody's bullets.
Yeah, Tet was the big thing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was
and
when
the
it all
second
turned.
night, they came around and they issued us a case of hand grenades, extra, because they said we're going to be attacked. And just a shock goes through you when they tell you that. Because until we got to that bunker that night, and the guy came around and said, we're going to be attacked, here's some extra hand grenades. And they gave us each a case of them. They told me when I got there that at the perimeter they used to put claymore mines facing out like you're supposed to. The enemy would sneak in at night, turn them around, and then make noises, hopefully that you would set them off. So they stopped putting them out. They didn't want anybody to get killed by mistake. And when we pulled guard duty, we had no lights. We had to walk the perimeter, which was a little scary. The guy that came in to the unit the same day I did was an E6. He was the head mess sergeant, best cook in the world. We had people from other units coming to our unit to eat. Really, it was kind of weird. During the Tet Offensive, we never had a cold meal. We had 3 meals, 3 hot meals a day during the whole time I was there. he just said, nobody's eating those rations. You know, if this mess hall's working, you're gonna have a hot meal. And we did. One morning, he had to cook 2 meals because that was the day the ammo dump blew up. And I was just putting my tray down on my table when it went up, and literally the dirt on the floor, because no matter how clean you think it is, it's a filthy country. That dirt went all the way to the ceiling in a big cloud. Everybody hit the floor, and it was quiet. Finally, somebody yelled out, "Everybody out." Nobody's moving. Everybody out. So the first guy goes to the door, you watch him, he opens the door, looks out, and he runs. Next guy looks out, runs. When I got to the I see a mushroom cloud, and then I started running. Well, I was running to my post. That day, my post was at the radar. I got about halfway up there, I realized I had no helmet, no flak jacket, no rifle, no ammunition. I left it on my bunk. One night when I was on my 24-hour shift, when you're doing that, you sleep near the radar instead of in your normal bunk. So I got woken up by the lieutenant on duty. It was raining, pouring rain, and he said he can't see any targets on the scope. Well, unfortunately, a Doppler radar, which that's the kind of radar that was, picks up anything that moves. Clouds with rain move, so it picks them up. So it just blocks out about 20 miles of image on the screen. And he didn't like that. And I kept telling him, it's rain, I can't get rid of it. He just kept insisting that I had to get rid of it. You're not going to sleep until you get rid of it. So I went to the radar, I switched it to test mode. And that just threw up some targets and a clear screen. And he was happy, he went back to bed. I switched it back to normal, and then I went back to bed.
One thing that sticks out was in the Azores, there was a plane crash up on the mountain. This is a Portuguese island. I had to set up a morgue, and then I had to go up to the site with a bunch of people, and we took body bags, and we filled body bags with pieces because there were only 6 full bodies together. And this was right between 2 hurricanes, and that was unfortunately why the plane went into the mountain. Nobody survived the crash, but that's one of the things that probably gives me the most nightmares of anything. When somebody in the Massachusetts, Rhode Island area in the Air Force was killed or hospitalized, I was given as much information as possible about that individual, who I was going to be contacting, if they had identified their specific religion. If it was a death, which most of them were, I would be given what religion they were, and then, so I would go to the town. I would try to find out what church, synagogue, mosque they went to, and then I would try to get the minister to go, or priest, or rabbi, whatever, to go with me. And you know, and obviously, as soon as they would see an Air Force officer walking off the steps, they knew what was happening, and that was hard because there was just a range of emotions from everywhere, from just, you know, no, you're wrong, to it's your fault, to, you know, I just heard from him, because all of the people back during Vietnam, and those I had to notify, were men. It was, that really was just the most horrible thing. I mean, I've had lots of pressures and stuff like that, but nothing affected me, emotionally affected me more than when I had to do that, because you're telling these people that their husband, their son, their relationship, fiance, is not coming back, or maybe coming back without an arm or a leg, or with not being able to walk. And in some ways the deaths were easier, but I mean, because I didn't just, my job was not just go, let them know, and walk away. I worked with them through a lot of the trauma, and helped them get the benefits that they were entitled to.
And that's not something like that we get to learn about in school. We don't learn what like people go through, and like in school, it's just like, okay, this is what happened in this war, and this is the outcome and stuff. You don't learn people had to do what you did and stuff, and you don't get the same feeling about people. And you have a lot more respect for people once you know like what they actually went through, rather than just hearing, okay, they served. It's a lot different.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I mean, and what I did was nothing compared to the people who were out there on the front line. Also, doing Vietnam versus Afghanistan. The country is behind these people right now, even though we may not like the war, but we're honoring the veterans. Back during the Vietnam era, you almost didn't want to wear your uniform because, you know, people spit on you. People said, you know, you're a baby killer and what have you. At least today's vets are getting the respect they do deserve. So.
I remember being on a training mission, coming home to Fort Bragg, getting off the airplane and being home for a weekend, and in a couple days, I don't remember the exact timeline anymore, but it was short. I was barely, you know, used to the time zone and the temperature, and I got a phone call to pack my bags. And I hadn't been watching the news. I didn't know if it was even in the news, but that's when the Albania mission came out of nowhere. And I sense that these type of things happen all the time, where right now today we know of some big initiatives that are going on, and they're important, and by all means, you know, like Iraq, like Afghanistan, they're constant, they're in the news. There are always things going on that aren't in the news. And I got wrapped up into one of those things where it was I came home a couple days, pack your bags. I was on an airplane and I was gone for the next 2 months. Going to left Fort Bragg, landed in London, connected on a plane, landed in Naples, Italy, got off the plane, collected our bags, got on a helicopter, landed on a U.S. Navy boat in the Adriatic Sea, got on another helicopter, and I was in the embassy in Toronto. All of this within a 24-hour period. So we had 2 teams that went. And after the first day, went into Toronto, we pulled some people into the helicopter, we flew back to the boat. These were U.S. citizens, embassy people, foreign journalists, foreign nationals. And that mission was going on, helicopters back and forth, until all people are gone. Well, after the first day, and this was going on for about a week where we were pulling a lot of people in, after the first day, the other team that I was with left us because they got assigned to a conflict in Zaire, Africa, doing a similar type of mission. Again, I mean, I'm kind of occupied. I'm not reading the news. I don't know whatever's going on, but now it's just me and my team, and I happen to be leading that one. And it was just an example of how fast things can change, and you never know, and you never know when you're going to be from the low guy in the totem pole to the highest guy in charge, and you got to make decisions. And it was pretty eye-opening to see all that happen that quickly. All worked out very well. I mean, you know, it was a well-done mission. The Marines working with another branch of service was another key thing there. Both the Marines and the Navy in that case was also a neat thing to do, because up till that time I had only worked within the U.S. military in different units. But my job was a luxury in that I got a different experience every time. Also had the luxury to, because of the uniqueness of our job, work with some foreign units. In my case, after we had left Bosnia in our mission there was a German unit that was going to be stepping in to do some of the work that we were doing. So I got got a chance to spend about 6 weeks in Germany working with that unit, showing them how we did things, what we knew. Another great experience.
I mean, you could start from the beginning, the nervousness of going away. It's the first time to boot camp in 1990 at Fort Dix with everybody yelling and the drill sergeants helping you along, as you say. Going through flight school in the Army in 1999, learning how to be a pilot. That was a great memory. 1 year down at Fort Rucker, Alabama. Sort of like a college atmosphere, but still military, where we learned how to fly helicopters. Biggest memory in the military would be combat, being there end of 04, all of 05 with my whole battalion. We flew 10,000 combat hours total between our battalion. we were the only battalion in Jersey to deploy specifically in the job of what they're meant to do. So it was a good memory of flying over there. And then also one of my most rewarding things in the military was being an instructor at Rutgers ROTC, because I got to influence, you know, the future military officers. I got to teach the freshmen. And I just left there, actually. I got here in June, so I missed that job. I got to do that for 2 years. And plus I went to Rutgers, so it was an added bonus, you know.
What lessons did you learn that during your service that are helpful to your everyday life?
I don't know. I think one of them is that you learn how to live by yourself, even though you're with 100 guys. You learn. You learn how to. What does that mean? Learn how to live with yourself, but you learn how to take care of yourself.
What advice would you give young people considering serving in the military today?
I think if they don't know what their goals are, they should go into the military.
Yeah.
And if anything, I think you'll come out a man. If I can say it briefly, that's what I think it does.
You know, I look back at fellows that so young that did so many wonderful things for our country, and I just thank God that you know, it turned out the way it did. That fellas did not have to go back. Unfortunately, they did have to go back, many of them. But I appreciate life. I appreciate people. I appreciate all that's been done for our country by all of these young fellows, and I still feel the same way. I honor all. I honor all.
What lessons did you learn during your service that are most helpful to your everyday life today?
Don't take chances.
Like, what advice would you give to someone that wants to join the Army today?
Oh, basically like when I was a dairy farmer. If you fall down, pick yourself up and get started again.
The learned lesson is, you know, self-efficient. Be yourself. You know how to survive, how to keep yourself occupied, and give you an opportunity to get an advance in education too. Yeah. I think that personally, every young man, or young ladies or whatever, like all the other country, need to serve 1 year. It makes a better person.
Responsibility, you know, you learn at a young age. You know, they just throw you right into, they don't care how old you are, but you learn responsibility and respect right away. Today, if someone asked me about going into the military, I'd probably tell them to persevere. You know, it's not an easy life, especially in today's world, where there's always a chance of somebody being put, you might not be a foot soldier, but you're going to be probably close to that if you get sent into a war area. So, you know, always be alert, trust your instincts, and the experience is something that you'll never lose. There's so much that comes out of it. The friends that you make, people that you meet, the countries. I mean, I visited a lot of countries. Unfortunately, one of them had to be during a war.
Listen.
It's a good one.
That's the one. I was, when I was younger, I didn't listen real well. That taught me to slow down and listen a little better.
Yeah.
So from that point on, I started putting my ears to work more. It's a great experience. You end up having friends that you will never forget. You'll learn a lot. There'll be things that you do that you would never have the opportunity to do normally, and it's well worth it.
I learned a lot of lessons. War teaches you the value of life. That's number one. It teaches you what you can do and what you can't do. Teaches a lot about your country and the moral behaviors of your country, you know, like that you're in. And I think it just made me really to realize the seriousness of life. Like prior to that, I'd been kind of carefree and whatnot, and I think it's really helped me make decisions in my life. I was in charge of people there, so there was things that I learned administratively and like that went beyond myself. You know, I can thinking beyond myself. But I think the biggest thing that I learned was just the value of human life, whatever that is, because like there was people who didn't come back.
Well, you just have to do your job. That's, in the military, everybody focuses on the job. No matter what the situation is, you just do the job.
Yeah.
And that, you know, that kind of helps you get through any job. Just do the job.
I learned a lot of leadership skills. I learned a lot of teamwork skills. I learned how to make decisions in very tough situations. You know, to be able to think on my feet. I mean, there were many times when I had to react and do this situation with this plane crash in the Azores. If I stopped to have thought about it, I would have probably not been able to do the things I was able to do.
What advice would you give to someone that would like to join the military today?
I would say think it through. Make sure that this is something that you want to do, that you've got the right mindset to do it. Because the military, I think the military is a great career for many people. Is it the right career for everybody? I'm very proud of those people that do serve. I give them a lot of respect because they know that they may be putting their lives on the line, and they're willing to do that for you and me and for the rest of the country.
One example that I shared a little earlier really stands to my mind, which is you never know what to expect, and be prepared for the unexpected. I can tell you that you know, the respect that people in the military show and that you're trained to show is something you take with you for the rest of your life. And I'll speak more broadly. You know, what the military did for me, after I left it, I went back to college and finished my college degree, and I had that on my resume. Having that on your resume is not only a great conversation starter, but it's a great sign of respect that people give you. And I can tell you that it gave me an edge, having that time in service, doing things later in life, and you know, getting a job. And I remember interviewing for the job I got, and the guy that was interviewing me was an Air Force veteran.
A lot of things. First of all, when you see things combat-wise, and you have that kind of schedule and that kind of work, it helps you put things in perspective when you come back to peacetime. We have this joke, when bullets aren't flying, it's a lot easier to deal with things. So if somebody's having a bad day, they got to wake up early, or they got to work 8 hours in the office. I just think back of times where we served 12 hours in a dusty combat environment, flying 8-hour missions. You know, it helps put things in perspective, and helps you deal with the stressful things that are here at peacetime that really aren't stressful if you've been through other situations. Military, a lot of people make a mistake, like, I can't do anything else, I'm going to go join the military now. You hear that a lot. Well, working in recruiting and retention command and working over at Rutgers and seeing kids try to come in now, number one, don't ever get in trouble. Little violations now, you will not get in. Be able to pass a test. I mean, you've got to have a basic education to pass what's called the Asvab Test. It's the test, the entrance test, where if you don't pass, you're not even getting in.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of kids have problems with that can't get in the military that really want to. And if you want to become an officer in the Army, you better study more, and you have to have a college degree. So there's a lot of steps you have to take, and a lot of blocks you have to check to be able to get in. And also, we like to call it SAL, student, athlete, and a leader. You better have all three. You better be in shape too, because you could be the smartest guy in the world. If you're not in shape, then you can't perform all Army missions either. So you got to be a well-rounded individual.
Well, thank you for your time and service to our country.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you for your time and service to our country.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Time and service to our
Well,
country.
thank you for taking the time to interview me.
Well, thank you for your time and service to our country.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your time and service to our country.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time and service to our country.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you for your time and service to our country.
Okay, and thank you and good luck. Can you come?
Thank you. Well, thank you for your time and service to our country. Well, thank you for your time and service to our country.
You're quite welcome.
Well, thank you for your time and service to our country.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your time and service to our country.
Thank you for coming and taking your time.
If tomorrow all the things were gone I've worked for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife, I thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend us till today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, Detroit down to Houston, New York to LA, where there's pride